June 29th, 1962, 19 days after the execution of Bridget Bishop. Amidst the growing panic, fingers began to point in all directions. Accusations flew, tearing at the fabric of Salem society. This was the maelstrom into which Sarah Good, a marginalized and impoverished woman, would be drawn. Born into a world of hardship, Sarah Good's life was a constant struggle for survival. Sarah Good was born Sarah Solart in 1653 in Wenham, Massachusetts. Her father, John Solart, was a well-to-do innkeeper. However, her father's death in 1672 led to a significant decline in her family's financial status. Sarah first married Daniel Poole, a labourer who was also in debt. This marriage did not improve her financial situation, and Poole died, leaving her further burdened by debts. In 1689, Sarah married William Good, a labourer who was also struggling financially. They had 2 children, Dorcas, sometimes referred to as Dorothy, and an unnamed infant who died shortly after birth. Sarah found herself adrift in a community where survival depended on conformity and social standing. The Goods lived a hand-to-mouth existence, their poverty marking them as outsiders. They were extremely poor. They were often homeless, wandering from place to place in search of shelter. Sarah Good was known to beg door to door for food and work, which caused her to be viewed with disdain by the community. They were often in debt. They had to sell what little they owned to survive, and they were frequently involved in legal disputes over unpaid debts. Sarah's persistent begging and her contentious demeanour made her unpopular. She was often seen as a nuisance and was socially isolated. Her habit of muttering and cursing when refused help led to rumours that she was involved in witchcraft, even before the witch trials began. Sarah, with her independent spirit, did little to endear herself to the pious society of Salem. She became a familiar sight, her ragged figure trudging from door to door, begging for scraps to feed herself and her young daughter, Dorcas. Sarah's relationship with her husband, William Good, was strained due to their dire financial situation and the social stigma attached to their poverty. William Good did not defend her during the trials, indicating possible tensions or a lack of support. Sarah was the second woman to be accused in the Salem Witch Trials, largely because of her low social standing and her reputation for being difficult and disagreeable. Her daughter, Dorcas Good, was also accused and imprisoned, though she was eventually released. Much of Sarah Good's early life remains shrouded in the mists of time, a tale whispered in fragments. Life in this fledgling world was a precarious balance between survival and faith. Marriage, for a woman in Sarah's position, offered little respite from the harsh realities of her existence. The Goods, it seems, were a family adrift, never quite finding their footing in the rigid social hierarchy of Salem. They moved from town to town, their poverty following them like a shadow, forcing them to rely on the charity of others for survival. Whispers followed Sarah as she went, her name spoken with a mixture of pity and disdain. As the years passed, Sarah's reputation became increasingly tarnished. She was labelled as troublesome, a woman of questionable morals and suspect beliefs. Good was known for her abrasive and contentious demeanour. She often argued with and was generally disliked by her neighbours, which contributed to the perception of her as a troublesome and possibly malevolent person. She had conflicts with several members of the community, including accusations that she had cursed people who refused to help her. These personal vendettas played a role in her being accused. Stories circulated about her strange mutterings, her piercing gaze, and her alleged proclivity for cursing those who crossed her. Whether these tales were true or merely the product of malicious gossip, they served to solidify her image as an outcast. The seeds of suspicion had been sown, and in the fertile ground of fear in Salem would soon take root and grow into a monstrous accusation. The year 1692 was a crucible for Salem. It was against this backdrop of growing unease that the accusations against Sarah Good began to surface, transforming from hushed rumours into public condemnations. Sarah's name, already tainted by her social standing and unorthodox ways, became an easy target for those seeking explanations for the inexplicable. The strange afflictions plaguing the young women of Salem only served to amplify these whispers. What began as whispers quickly escalated into a chorus of condemnation, with even those who had once offered Sarah a wary kindness turning against her. At the heart of the accusations were the young women of Salem village, their youthful innocence seemingly corrupted by an unseen evil. Among them were Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams, girls on the cusp of womanhood, thrust into a windstorm of attention. Elizabeth Betty Parris was born on November 28, 1682. She was the 9-year-old daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, the minister of Salem village. Betty Parris was one of the first 2 girls to exhibit strange behaviours and symptoms in early 1692, which included fits, contortions, and outbursts. These behaviours were initially attributed to bewitchment. Along with her cousin Abigail Williams, Betty named several local women as witches, including Tituba, her family's enslaved woman, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. Their testimonies, delivered with a chilling mix of naivety and fervour, painted a damning picture of Sarah Good as a servant of the devil. Whether these girls genuinely believed themselves to be afflicted by witchcraft or were driven by ulterior motives, their accusations carried a terrifying weight. With each dramatic performance, the fear that gripped Salem tightened its hold, making it increasingly difficult to separate truth from fiction. As accusations against Sarah Good mounted, a web of fear and suspicion tightened around her. Neighbours, once willing to turn a blind eye to her begging and low social standing, now viewed her with distrust. Long-forgotten incidents were resurrected and scrutinized for signs of witchcraft. The power of these testimonies lay not in their factual accuracy, but in their ability to tap into the deep-seated fears of the community. Sarah Good, already an outcast, found herself utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare of her neighbours' making. Perhaps the most heartbreaking chapter in Sarah Good's ordeal involved her own daughter, young Dorcas. Barely 5 years old, Dorcas was swept up in the tide of hysteria, becoming both a witness against her mother and a victim of the trials themselves. She spoke of seeing her mother consort with a mysterious black dog, a creature often associated with the devil in Puritan lore. The exact details of what Dorcas may have said or experienced during the trials are not well documented, given her young age and the lack of comprehensive records from that time. Her words, delivered with a child's innocence, carried a chilling weight. For Sarah, already facing an uphill battle, Dorcas's testimony was a crushing blow, casting a long shadow over any hope of exoneration. The Salem courthouse, a stark and unforgiving space, became Sarah Good's battleground. It was here, in this austere hall of judgment, that she would face her accusers, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. Magistrates, clad in sombre attire, presided over the courtroom, their faces etched with a mixture of piety and suspicion. The stage was set for a trial that would test not only Sarah's resolve, but also the very soul of Salem. At the heart of the prosecution's case against Sarah Good lay a form of evidence as elusive as it was damning. Spectral evidence. The afflicted girls, their bodies contorted in apparent agony, pointed accusing fingers at Sarah, claiming to see her spectral form lurking in the shadows. These testimonies, delivered with a chilling conviction, held a powerful sway over the court. The judges, steeped in the religious doctrines of their time, found it difficult to dismiss the claims of these young women. This reliance on the intangible created a climate of fear, where any accusation, no matter how outlandish, could be given credence. Throughout her trial, Sarah Good maintained her innocence, her voice a lone beacon of reason in a courtroom consumed by fear. One of the most famous statements attributed to Sarah Good during her trial is her response to being accused of witchcraft. When questioned about the charges, she reportedly said, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." This defiant declaration was interpreted by some as a curse upon her accusers, and it added to the intensity of the proceedings. She denied the accusations levelled against her, proclaiming her faith in God and pleading for the court to see through the web of lies spun by her accusers. Yet her pleas fell on deaf ears. The judges, swayed by the spectral evidence and the emotional testimonies of the afflicted girls, seemed unwilling or unable to consider the possibility of Sarah's innocence. One specific instance of spectral evidence in Sarah Good's case involved the testimony of individuals who claimed to have seen her apparition visiting them at night or in dreams, causing them distress or afflictions. These accounts were used as evidence against her during the trial. The court, blinded by superstition and eager to appease the anxieties of the community, seemed determined to make an example of her, regardless of the truth. The verdict, when it came, surprised no one. After days of testimony, of accusations and denials, the jury delivered its judgment. Sarah Good was guilty of the crime of witchcraft. A hush fell over the courtroom as the sentence was pronounced. Sarah Good, convicted on the basis of spectral evidence and the whispers of a community gripped by fear, was to be hanged until dead. For Sarah Good, the verdict marked the beginning of the end, the final chapter in a life marred by hardship and injustice. The morning of July 19th, 1692, dawned grey and heavy over Salem. It was a day etched in infamy, a day when justice would be served, or so the townsfolk believed as they prepared to bear witness to the execution of Sarah Good. Led from the cramped confines of the Salem jail, Sarah emerged into the harsh light of day, her face pale and drawn, yet her spirit unbroken. The walk to Gallows Hill was a slow and agonizing procession, yet even as the shadow of the gallows loomed large, Sarah Good refused to be cowed. Gallows Hill, a stark and unforgiving rise overlooking the town, the spot where only 19 days before Bridget was hanged, served as a grim reminder of the consequences of transgression in the Puritan world. It was here, on this windswept knoll, that Sarah Good would meet her end, her life offered as a sacrifice to appease the town's insatiable hunger for justice. As she stood on the scaffold, the crowd pressing in around her, a hush fell over the assembly. All eyes were fixed upon her, eager to bear witness to the final act of this tragic drama. In that moment, Sarah Good, the outcast, the accused witch, commanded the attention of the very community that had condemned her. With her head held high, Sarah Good addressed the crowd, her voice clear and strong, echoing across the hushed gathering. She spoke of her innocence, of the lies that had been spun around her, of the injustice that had brought her to this moment. The exact words Sarah spoke before her execution were not recorded verbatim and likely lost to time. Her words, imbued with a quiet dignity, cut through the silence, challenging the very foundations of her conviction. She spoke of her faith, of her belief in a just and merciful God, and she declared before the assembled throng that she was no witch, but a God-fearing woman unjustly accused. Her plea, though eloquent and heartfelt, fell on deaf ears, for the hearts of the townsfolk were hardened. The execution, when it came, was swift and brutal. With a final prayer escaping her lips, Sarah Good met her end, her body left to swing from the gallows as a grim spectacle for all to see. The crowd watched in silence as life ebbed away from her, a collective shudder running through the assembly. In that moment, as the life drained from Sarah Good's body, something shifted in the heart of Salem. The spectacle of her death, far from quelling the fires of terror, seemed to ignite a new wave of unease. Doubts, long suppressed, began to surface. Whispers of unease circulated through the crowd, questioning the validity of the accusations, the reliability of the spectral evidence that had sent Sarah Good and others to their deaths. The seeds of doubt, once sown, quickly took root, spreading through the community like wildfire. The execution of Sarah Good marked a turning point in the Salem Witch Trials. It was a moment of reckoning, a stark and brutal illustration of the devastating consequences of unchecked fear and fanaticism. It would be a long and arduous journey back from the abyss of paranoia and suspicion that had consumed Salem. In the aftermath of the trials, as the grip of hysteria loosened, the people of Salem were left to grapple with the consequences of their actions. The shadow of the gallows, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the injustices committed, loomed large over the community. Sarah Good, along with the other victims of the Salem Witch Trials, would not be forgotten. From the ashes of the Salem Witch Trials arises a timeless message, one that transcends the boundaries of time and place. It is a story that speaks to the very heart of the human condition, reminding us that the capacity for both compassion and cruelty resides within each of us. The Salem Witch Trials stand as a chilling testament to the fragility of justice, the enduring power of fear, and the importance of safeguarding the rights of all individuals. Let the echoes of Salem serve as a clarion call for compassion, a reminder of our shared humanity and a beacon of hope for a more just and equitable future.